Xavier Becerra comes to Sacramento and actually answers reporter questions. We'll tell you what he said this week on Next Round. Welcome to the Pacific Research Institute Next Round podcast. I'm Tim Anaya, PRI's Vice President of Marketing and Communications. And with me, as always, is our friend, PRI Communications Director, Matt Fleming. How are you today, Matt?
Good, Tim. How are you?
I am good. Well, a lot going on in the political world, a lot going on in the legislature, so lots of things to talk about today. I think the big news was a great event that I had the chance to attend last week. Politico had what it called its Sacramento Summit. And, it's one of these events where my friend Morgan always would joke it's a who's who of who's that. But it really was an all-star. It was a spectacle, as I told a friend of mine who I saw there. And it was basically just about every big name on the state political scene all in one place. And that included the, up until now, elusive former Attorney General and would-be next governor of California, Xavier Becerra, who after last week we talked about, he sort of ran and hid after attending a press conference, and reporters chased after him to ask him questions. Imagine that, reporters wanting to ask him questions at a press conference. He sat down for a conversation with Politico's Melanie Mason, and he stood afterwards and answered many reporter questions. So maybe let's start out with that. I know you wrote about this issue in your column the other day in the Sacramento Bee, which I highly encourage our listeners and viewers to check out. Do you think he has redeemed himself with his day in Sacramento, subjecting himself to actually answering questions? Or do you think there's a bigger issue here that we should expect more of California's next governor?
I think he changed the narrative for a brief period of time. It's hard to say he's dodging reporters when he spoke to reporters, but as we've talked about repeatedly, it's a campaign strategy for him to talk as little as possible. He's even said that. He came out, I believe it was at the Politico event, but maybe somewhere else, said that he's not going to make a bunch of bold promises. And I think part of that is because he doesn't have anything bold to say, and also because he wants to say as little as possible.
He seems definitely to be, well, I'm going to be charitable and say holding his cards to the vest. I mean, as we've discussed here, I think his platform for his candidacy is get elected governor.
It is, and it's the wrong strategy for democracy. It's the right strategy for him. He is many points ahead. He's almost certainly going to be the next governor. That's not to take anything away from Steve Hilton, who's running the best Republican campaign I've seen, I think, since I've lived in California. But, at the end of the day, it's a math problem, and I don't know if Hilton has the solution. Having said that, it's the right political strategy for Becerra, because when you're that far ahead, all you can do is mess up. It's not like, if you're up by 20,
right,
there's not a whole lot of room for improvement there.
Don't put your foot in the mouth, right? And also, when you're paying for something, right, I just want the thing built. I don't want the Taj Mahal, right? So you kind of, if you're up 17, that's good enough.
And as we will talk about later, every time he does give a policy idea, it's usually pretty amateurish and bad and not well thought out, and defies the laws of economics. And we'll get into it, but I would tell him to keep his mouth shut too, because his ideas are stupid.
One of the things too, there's a very good article this morning in Politico from our friend Jeremy White, and basically the article is about how much of a policy mystery Becerra is. And you could take the article many different ways. I don't know. I take it as, are those really good traits that our next governor should have? Should you have more than a handful of talking points or a handful of poorly thought out ideas to talk about when you actually do subject yourself to reporter interviews?
It's almost like he was polling at 2% for almost the entire primary.
Right. He certainly has the feel of that, right? I guess we should go back and look at Tony Thurman's platform and see
Yeah.
if there are any similarities. Well, let's talk about some of these ideas, and there may be a little there with some of them, but some of them just seem a little silly. So, the big news from the conference was he said that when as he likes to say, when the Becerra era begins, they would like to give
That's his big idea.
That's his big idea,
Yeah,
right?
Becerra era, bumper stickers.
That's right. So all of the talk of the legislature, Democratic candidates everywhere, right, is lowering the cost of living. And so he has an idea to lower the cost of living, and that would be something called a power hour. And the point of it would be to give lower income families 2 hours of free electricity on the grid and relieve pressure on the grid at the same time. And so the thinking behind it, right, is we're producing all of this solar energy, and we're going to be, allegedly, if we're continuing the move to 100% renewal, we're going to be producing a lot more of it. And the challenge with solar energy, right, is storage and transmission. And so the issue is that we're producing so much solar energy during the day when energy use is a lot less, that the wholesale prices for solar go into the negative. And so it is kind of making this perverse incentive to not make electricity when, if you're a power provider, you're not making any money off of it. So apparently this is an idea that's been tried in Australia, that they gave away 3 free hours of electricity during the day to incentivize customers to shift their energy use to, sort of the middle day. I mean, I guess my thought on this is, well, aren't people working during the day and not at home during the day? So is that really much of a benefit that you're going to be encouraging them to do something when they're not at home? There's also no awareness of, gee, the policy agenda that you support and will continue as governor is doing more than anything to drive up energy costs in California and the cost of living. Matt, what do you think of the power hour?
You're right, Tim. There's a reason why it's low usage. It's not because people have just decided, you know what, I'm just not going to use power during this time. I just think when we talk about how a lot of these policies end up, sticking it to the middle class, here's another one. Rich people can afford these kinds of policies. Poor people are getting an hour for free or whatever it is. Middle class still just going to have to pay the same rate. Also, I'm not entirely sure that the governor has the ability to do that.
Yeah, I'm sure the PUC would have to order this, or they'd have to strike some kind of deal.
He said he was going to talk to the PUC, but they also don't. I don't think they can mandate a private company gives something for free.
That's a good question.
It's a legal gray area.
Yeah.
But even more than that, this is kind of the other thing I was thinking. There's nothing inherently wrong with having 100% renewable energy grid, right? Mm-hmm. There's a lot of great arguments to be made for it. Mm-hmm. If California wants to pursue that, great, and no disrespect to our friends in Bakersfield or anywhere else where they are harvesting renewable, traditional oil. Yeah. But there's a case to be made for it. My point is, if this is what you want to do, these types of things are not the solution. The solution would be getting a grid that actually makes sense. Right. How can we make the grid more modern in a way that we don't have to ration energy? Because that's also part of this article is, telling you to use energy when you're not at home, but then don't use it when you are at home, which is backwards. And then they're asking you to ration energy. Why don't you build a grid or a system that makes sense and actually works for people? They want you, in Sacramento, the hottest part of the day is 6 to like 8 p.m. And that's when they're like, oh, well, don't use your energy then. Well, that's when I want to use it because it's really hot and I have a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old. And you know what? I don't want them being in 95-degree weather inside the house.
It's not very healthy inside.
It's not very healthy. Yeah, tell the senior citizens, oh no, this is the time you're supposed to be rationing energy. That's the part about this that doesn't make sense. It's not the free hour thing. Even if it's legal, it's a marketing ploy. It's like the storage unit place next to my house that says first month free. First month's not free. It's just prorated over the rest of the time. They just want to get you in the door. I mean,
we also forget their policies. We already have tiered pricing based on time. It's the most expensive pricing during the summer months. It's from 5 to 8 p.m. I'm already incentivized that I don't run the dishwasher during that time. I run it on Saturday when it's usually the cheapest rates. I don't typically run the laundry during that time. Air conditioning's a different story. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing, right, is it's nice to give away other people's things for free. There's also a huge lack of rationality in all these policies. You know, there's been the debate for years, why doesn't hydropower count as renewable energy? There seems to be a little more reasonableness on nuclear power, keeping the one plant open that we have. There's certainly nothing going on about we need more nuclear power as part of the mix here. So yeah, there is a reasonable way to do it and do it right. This just seems to be the kind of bumper sticker kind of thinking that that's not what we need if we're going to come anywhere close to meeting the goal.
It just screams we have no real answers. And giving free energy to people means that other people are going to have to pay more, which we already pay the highest in the nation.
Right.
I mean, why don't you try making a grid that actually works?
That might be a wild idea there. Now, there's some other energy news that he made.
Another good Becerra idea?
Another good idea for the Becerra era. He says that California, though during the primary he said, well, I don't know that we're going to meet it. He says that California might be able to beat the 2035 target where all gas-powered cars would be banned, new sales of new gas-powered cars, of course. But then he says, well, if we invest in it, it absolutely is feasible, whatever that means. If we don't invest in the infrastructure, then it's not easy. He did leave out the possibility that he could push back the deadline, and he said that if, I don't know who they is, maybe regular folks, says slow down a little bit, I will slow down. Referring to California residents, which ones, we don't know. There's a lot to unpack there, starting with, look at what car buyers are telling you. We don't want them. We've gone way backwards as far as the number that need to be sold each year. And politicians like Becerra are kind of insistent that whether you like it or not, as our current governor is fond of saying, we are going to play car salesman for you. And, we've just had a new round of taxpayer-funded electric vehicle subsidies. It's 100 rules with them. I don't know that you could actually buy much of a car with them if you're eligible for them at all. But that's kind of the answer right there. If you have to basically bribe people to do this, well, is this a good idea in the first place?
I would say this is more rational than his prior. This is more rational than the power hour because this is actually acknowledging
delaying it.
Yeah, he's open to delaying it if they say they want it delayed.
I'm they, so maybe I'd say I want
I mean, let's start with the goal itself. The goal is arbitrary. It's something Gavin Newsom came up with because all he cares about is headlines.
Right.
There's no real sensible implementation plan.
Right.
Okay. So for him to even say, sort of, that the deadline itself is arbitrary, I appreciate that from him because that's sensible. Also, and we've talked about this before, there is not the infrastructure in place to make electric vehicles as the only vehicle make sense. The infrastructure is not in place. If you don't have a charger, which people that live in apartments don't have, Lots of people don't feel like spending I forget how much it is off the top of my head. It's like 5,000, 8,000 to put a charger into your house, something like that. That's not a killer, right? Like people can afford that.
Right.
But, if you are at paycheck to paycheck or slightly above that, that's a massive cost. And you're not going to pay for that with the cost offsets, because in places like PG&E territory, it's actually more expensive a lot of the time to pay for electricity. So he's right that the infrastructure actually needs to be upgraded. But again, a lot of that is going to come on the backs of middle-class Californians who are going to pay for this whole thing, while they have to also pay for their own installation of a car charger, pay for a brand new electric vehicle, which is way more expensive. And the only reason why the electric vehicle market was sort of thriving was because middle-class Californians were paying for rich people to buy those cars.
That's right. The other thing, of course, missing from the whole discussion, right, is that, as Pierre Eyes found in our research, if all these things click into place, starting in 2045, we'll be 21% short every day of the power we need to run the grid without blackouts because of all of these policies. So
again, we need a better grid.
We need a better grid, right?
But I will say, of all of the things he says, and we are going to talk about, this is the one that's most grounded in reality.
Yeah, I mean,
because he's at least acknowledging that the deadline is arbitrary and that there are structural problems that need to be fixed. So kudos, Becerra, you almost had a coherent policy. I like it.
So the last kind of big news that he made here was he's pledging to keep all Californians insured after he called them the Trump health care cuts. And he says, I don't want anyone to lose their health care. In fact, I want to get more Californians insured and covered. What I will do is I will become the backstop. California will become the backstop for health care. Now, this is, kind of interesting, because his sort of claim to fame on health care was he was the Secretary of Health and Human Services. He had no experience in that before the job. Most people, including his colleagues in the Biden administration, generally pan his performance as HHS Secretary. So we shudder to hear things like that, because goodness knows what that means. But we do know one thing for certain. California's budget is, really stitched together with Scotch tape. That might be generous to say it's stitched together with Scotch tape. And whoever the next governor is going to face big budget problems into the future. And when you're saying, I'm going to take on all of these healthcare costs, including the full Monty for healthcare for the undocumented, well, then you're going to wonder, okay, what priorities of Californians are going to be cut, or what massive tax increases are going to come forward if, he becomes, the Becerra era becomes the backstop era.
Well, I mean, just in hearing that, get out your checkbooks, middle-class Californians, because we are, just with these three announcements alone, we are going to be paying
a lot of money to do all these things.
A lot of money to do all these things. There may not be anything inherently wrong with any of these ideas, right? I think all of this highlights two fundamental things. One, California as a state and its public policy and infrastructure and just all of its stuff has been withering and atrophying for years now, right? It would be nice if these California Democrats would just pick one of these things and focus on it. I'm not saying these are all things I would vote for, but these are things that California voters, the majority, have asked for.
Yeah, these probably all test very well when PPIC asks, what do you think?
Not the gas car
Not
ban.
the gas car ban. That did not. But the others, right?
But pick one of these and do it, as opposed to trying to say you're going to do all these things, because that's the problem, is then none of these things actually ever get done. And 15, 20 years from now, we're still going to have the exact same problems, and they're just going to be infinitely more expensive to fix. And that's, I think, to me, just the California voters, ask for actual results. Don't ask for headlines. Ask for results.
Right. But they love a headline.
They love a good headline, yeah.
Now, at the end of the day, when Hilton or when Becerra did his press conference, the question that's been dogging him, he was asked again, and he answered again, will you commit to debates with Steve Hilton? And the answer is, well, yes, I will do debates, but I won't commit to a time or place, or, we'll do them. Trust me. I have no doubt that they will do a debate. We've joked, it'll be on a Thursday afternoon at, 2 o'clock when no one's watching. Do you think he has kind of moved beyond this issue now, or do you think this is going to dog him until he actually says, I'm showing up at this place?
I think if there's one question we can count on reporters to ask is, are you going to do debates? That's because they love debates.
They're the star of the debates. That's why.
It is legitimately good for democracy to have debates. We don't need to have 10. But having one at least is a good start.
We probably had too many in the primary.
We had too many in the primary. We mock Becerra, but he has some really bad ideas hiding in that brain of his, and I think it's important for California voters to at least know what they're getting into.
And he was
He was okay at the debates, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he wasn't particularly good. He wasn't particularly bad. Now, it will be a little different when it's one-on-one, and that...
I think he'd be okay, though. I think...
He's not a dumb guy. He's got stuff to say.
Getting some things out of him about what he plans on doing, if elected, I think is really, really important.
Mm-hmm. And it is admittedly a challenge to go against someone who did this for a living, as his challenger... Steve Hilton did on Fox News for many years.
Steve also has nothing to lose.
That's right.
So there is that. That's that whole dynamic thing. Becerra has everything to lose. Steve has nothing to lose. If he loses by 40% or he loses by 45% or he loses by 35%, it's still a landslide loss.
That's right. That's right.
And then if he wins, then that's obviously great too for him.
So I think it's important we talk a little bit about Hilton. Hilton was there, speaking of at 2 in the afternoon. He was on at 2 in the afternoon. And, as always at these sorts of things, I would say the crowd was certainly a center-left crowd. It was kind of the Sacramento intelligentsia, kind of Sacramento insiders were the crowd. And, they gave him a polite reception. There wasn't any heckling or booing or anything. But I don't think he really made a lot of news in any of his answers other than 2 of them. One, we learned that he still carries a flip phone, which people were apparently obsessed with that. But I admire it. His point is he wants to, kind of stimulate actual conversation and, not burying one's head in their phone. The other thing that was interesting is obviously throughout the day there was a lot of discussion about AI. It's becoming, in some of these primaries, Democrats have kind of scored some cheap points just running against AI. Obviously it's a union thing. Unions think AI is going to put them out of business and take away jobs. But he had a very interesting, they asked him kind of about, what do you think of the strategy of the people who are running these AI firms and kind of how they're approaching government and approaching the public? And he made the point, that we have a real public relations problem with AI. And he said one of the things that was interesting was that I think the average person probably is very interested in the potential of AI, but a little bit cautious of it. And he said, one of the dumb things they did, right, was that they're acknowledging all the problems that could come from it. He said, well, no wonder people are kind of against this or kind of getting up in arms. He said, yeah, it's just because you told them to fear what you're building. And that's a very good point. I hadn't thought of it in that way before, but he's absolutely right. And so the discussion then turned to, what's the public policy prescription here? What should we be doing? And obviously he talked about the risk to children are real. But the way he put it, I thought was very clever. He said, we're under-regulating some of the harms, like in relation to children, for example. But he says with the creative community and their output, we're in danger of over-regulating some of the potential benefits. And I thought that was a very interesting way to put it, because if we know, if we were going to make a list of what does government do the worst at, and there are a lot of things, I would put number one on the list. It's writing policy about tech and innovation, because they have no idea what they're talking about when they write these laws. And they're trying to, with legislation, make innovation happen. And you can't snap your fingers and make innovation happen. That's the problem with the renewable energy. That's the problem with the gas car ban. It's the problem with AI.
Tim, I agree.
Matt was speechless. That was so brilliant. I think on there you saw, if you're Becerra, this is a formidable contender on the debate stage.
Yeah.
And, you kind of...
In a more competitive state, Steve Hilton would be real force to reckon with.
And
he really is running a good campaign.
Yeah, I mean, they're coming out with ideas galore, some better than others, but this is a man of creativity. He thinks on his feet. He is well-versed on all of what's going on. For someone who hasn't worked a day in California government.
He's showing up to places, and Tim, you and I know this is a subtle thing that I think matters. He's showing up to places that Republican candidates traditionally wouldn't so-called waste their time. Like, he was in Boyle Heights campaigning, and that's just not somewhere. If someone was doing a media stop in LA, a Republican, they probably wouldn't do it in Boyle Heights. I mean, Democrats probably wouldn't do it very well there either, because it's not a very populated place.
You'd have someone outside watching the car to make sure you weren't broken into while you were at the event.
But, I mean, he's making an effort to go to places and go all over the state, and it's great. He should be applauded for that.
Well, and to the, in the past, right, it was always, let's open the South Central headquarters for the Republican candidate, which is a wonderful thing, but you just, signed a lease for 2 months. Did you really do anything? And the answer, of course, is always no with that.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, Republican candidates won't want to go to San Francisco because they're like, no one's going to listen to us. Well, no one's going to listen to you if you don't go there.
That's right.
I get it. I wouldn't spend all my time there, but I think you should go and at least try to talk to people.
Have to be governor of all Californians. You want all the votes of all Californians. It was, truer words have never been said when Katie Porter said, why would I waste my time with, certain pockets of voters? Well, the voters rendered the judgment probably about what she should have expected when you make a comment like that. Well, the other kind of big news at the Politico event that I thought was very interesting, and it's rare that you have this kind of tit for tat, was we had Attorney General Rob Bonta, and we had the chief legal officer for Paramount Skydance. And the whole conversation was about this massive litigation that's ongoing right now with Bonta and other state attorney generals trying to block the Paramount Warner Brothers merger. And I was struck when I was sitting there watching the presentation, especially Bonta, because he had a kind of really a belligerence about him, I thought. And he, I've read in other forums, and I've heard him, being interviewed in other forums. He believes he's belligerently right on the facts of the case, of how he's doing it, but yet it is objectively true that, as their legal officer, Makan Del Rahim, made clear, Paramount may move. And the kind of the rumor is, if they don't make a deal with the state by October 1st, they're going to move their headquarters to Texas or Georgia or Tennessee or an unnamed other state that's wooing them. And there'd be a 3 or 4 year plan to move all the filming out of California.
And they're going to be hit with a penalty of how much a day if they...
$7 million a day if they don't have the deal closed by October 1st.
So, I mean, that's because people will say, oh, companies would always make that kind of threat. But, I mean, they're going to be losing a lot of money each day if they don't do something. So I could see that happening.
And he said, there's a point where you have a fiduciary duty to shareholders. You have to take a look at the business environment and look to see what's best not only for the community and the business, and ultimately you got to go to the place where you're wanted. And we've heard this over these, so much of location decisions is about, hey, do they want to work with me? And if you have the chief law enforcement officer of the state basically saying, I want to sue you out of existence, well, why on earth would you locate your business in the state despite their intentions to stay here? It's Hollywood. It's where you would on the natural want to film. And obviously, there will be, by necessity, some operations that would continue in California. But, he calls it, in his discussion, it's an attempt, quote, to blackmail the regulators who are daring to enforce the law fairly and firmly, who are daring to stand up for the rule of law, this is ironic, for the free and fair market instead of a rigged market, and for consumers and workers in the industry. Now, one of the issues, of course, is that as a combined company, they actually won't gain any market share. They'll be at the same, I think they would be I think it's the fifth or the sixth largest entertainment company. You would have thousands of jobs lost if they moved out of state. There's always going to be some people who unfortunately lose their jobs when you have a merger. But this is about more than people working at the studio, right? So much of the Southern California economy are all the trades that have some piece of the business at these studios, including like regular people who you rent their house to film a commercial, right? And so I think that is just... you just see a guy who, watching him, and you look at the look on his face, this guy either just is out to get them politically, right? He just hates that, the Ellisons have tried to cozy up to the Trumps to get it approved federally, or he thinks that's going to get me all the deals with the unions. Well, if you lose all the jobs, what good did that do you?
It's true. I mean, our Wayne Weingarten has written about this. The loss of Hollywood industry in California is real. Mm-hmm. It's not a growing industry. It's leaking jobs. There's a reason why California just doubled its film tax credit, because it's doing everything it can to try to bribe them to stay and make it financially feasible, which, to go back to our power grid point, it's not a bribing thing that's the problem. There is a structural problem, so fix the structural issues. Look, we don't always love everything that comes out of Hollywood, and it is over the top, absurd sometimes when they start talking about politics. But I think we can all agree that Hollywood is awesome. It's an awesome part of California. Yeah. The film industry should stay in California, if only it had a government that was actually trying to support it and not just beholden to one special interest, which is the unions. Right. It's too expensive to produce in California. People can't afford to live here. It's heavily unionized. There's all these regulations about what you have to do. And it turns out that there are other states that give them, they might not have the weather, but they give them a better deal overall.
They literally roll out the red carpet.
And, so what's to say that 3 years from now, there's not going to be some other shakedown from Rob Bonta who's looking to make a name for himself?
Right. And the film tax credit, there's been a lot of discussion of that. I think it's kind of cronyism.
Yeah.
But that really is government picking winners and losers. It's basically friends of the governor get a little bit of a kickback.
If only there was a tax credit for all the people thinking about leaving California, right, that doubled their incentive to stay into the state.
That's right. That's right. And of course, the film runaway production issue, it actually is a global issue. Mm-hmm. That a lot of our production is going to England, to Ireland, to Canada. Canada is the Hollywood of Hallmark Channel movies.
Which is very crazy, because Canada is certainly no beacon of free marketism.
not in any way, but Vancouver does look a lot like California, and Toronto looks a lot like New York. So, um, the show you're watching at night, especially like Law and Order type shows, most of those you may not realize that are filmed in Canada. Um, well, there's a lot going on in the legislature, and we're going to save that for next week, where we really get into our end of session preview, and we're going to bring on our friend Steve Greenhut, director of PRI's Free City Center, and we're going to do a deep dive into all of the end of session issues. But I wanted to close with the other major news on the campaign front in the last week is we have a major new statewide poll. This is from Berkeley Institute of Governmental Studies, and as Matt has teased throughout, it found in the governor's race, Xavier Becerra has an 18-point lead. He's ahead 55% to 37%, with 7% undecided. And, Becerra's way ahead in the Bay Area, in Los Angeles County, on the Central Coast. Hilton's ahead in the San Joaquin Valley, Orange County, and in the North Coast area, or the state of Jefferson, as we might refer to it.
And historically speaking, a Republican will probably get around 40% statewide. So 37's below that. You have some undecideds. I would expect to see Steve Hilton somewhere probably around 40%, which is a real travesty because, again, he's run a really good campaign.
Well, they asked, why are you supporting the candidate you're supporting? And so for Becerra, the reasons people gave, the most given answer was supporting traditional Democratic policies like expanding health care, and that he will aggressively fight Trump administration policies. Both had 38%. Whereas, why are you supporting Hilton? Voters said, well, you support traditional Republican policies like lowering taxes, 55%. But then, second most given answer, 28%, he's not part of the California political establishment. And that's interesting because you would think that's not, it certainly doesn't rate high for Democrats. It's under.
Democrats love their establishment.
And isn't that interesting, right, where you get this vibe from all the states and all the primaries, right, if everybody's running as an outsider. I'm not this 80-year-old who's been in government for 100 years, but yet doesn't rank at all on the list of the issues of why they're supporting Becerra, and maybe that's because he is anything but not part of the political establishment.
And generally speaking, I'm against the whole outsider thing. I'm not saying that an outsider candidate can't be a good governor, but Steve Hilton does have a record being a top policy advisor and campaign advisor to a successful conservative tenure in England. So he's certainly not a newcomer to politics. He's just not part of the traditional California establishment. Although the California Republican establishment, I'm not really sure what that even is anymore. But
right. The other news in the poll was we've got some polling of some of the ballot measures that we've been talking about here on Next Round. And so the kind of headline number is they asked where voters stand on Proposition 40, which is the wealth tax. And right now, and the pollsters just read the title and summary for these initiatives. Remember, that is controversial because the aforementioned Rob Bonta, and as many of his predecessors have done, wrote he has the power to write the title and summary, and he wrote them in the most politicized way to maximize the chances of the causes he supports or opposes. And that measure starts out, yes, 48%, no, 41%. That is, the rule of thumb, right, is you want to start out over 50. So that's going to be a tough, probably pretty evenly fought campaign. It's a lot of money, over $100 million, been socked away on this to fight this campaign. They've already reserved over $85 million in television ads, so get ready. You're going to see a lot of ads on this issue. They also asked on the two other members, our listeners and viewers may remember we talked about the companion measures that kind of the fail-safe, that if the wealth tax passes, then if either of these others gets more votes, it would kind of cancel out the wealth tax. There's Propositions 41 and 42. And really, it finds that voters haven't really focused on those yet. They start out about even. Prop 41, which is, I believe that's the one with the auditing. That is yes 35%, no 37%. So basically, voters haven't really formed a clear picture on that one. And Prop 42, little better, yes 40%, no 37%. And that one is about retroactive taxes. So the whole issue with the wealth tax, right, is that it would have taken effect on January 1st. Now, that's heavily questionable. It might be thrown out in court, but it would do away with the measure basically on those lines. So, there's there's a lot of work that both sides have to do on all of those measures. Matt, what stands out to you in those initial numbers?
I'm actually surprised the wealth tax isn't doing better to start out. Californians love socialist rhetoric and redistribution policies, so I'm kind of surprised that it's not starting out over 50%. I think it's going to be a real battle, but I don't know what I actually think will win. But I think that the other measures, particularly the audit one, without taking a position on a ballot measure, I mean, auditing government spending is a good thing, and we don't do enough of it. We have one auditor, and they do a pretty good job, but, as we saw with Governor Newsom's homelessness spending, no one's paying attention. They're not even tracking where the money's going. And so more audits of these massive ballot measures and state policies is, as a concept, a good idea. So I guess I'm just kind of surprised by this whole thing. And I wonder, too, if some of it is like there's 14 ballot measures.
Yeah.
I think
there's going to be a lot of people vote no on the whole thing.
It's just so much. Yeah, it's just so much,
Or do they get to all of them? Right? I think you're going to have a lot where, by the time we get to Prop 43, are we still going on, right?
And look, you and I study this stuff for a living. It doesn't make us experts, but we do pay attention to this stuff for a living. And half the time I'm reading these ballot measures, and I'm like, I just don't even know what this is, and I don't even want to understand because it's making my head hurt. I mean, voter ID, which you're going to talk about in a second. That's pretty straightforward. You either like the idea or you don't like the idea. There could be messages that are persuasive, but it makes sense. Ex post facto laws and tax increases and stuff like that. I'm not saying it's not important to have laws in place, although I think they're kind of already laws, but it's just much harder for someone. And if you're already on your 7th or 8th ballot measure and you're going through it, you're like,
oh gosh, I don't want to read on.
I don't want to
read on. Especially when
you
get language thrown at you like ex post facto laws.
Ex post facto, that's exactly right.
And you are right. The last one I wanted to pull out in this batch of polling was on Prop 39. And Prop 39 is the voter ID measure. And, we hear from our Republican friends, you may think this, it's common sense. Why, it should be, you have to show an ID for everything. Why shouldn't you have to show it for voting? It should not be partisan at all. Everybody, Democrats, Republicans, support that. Well, let's look at the numbers. And the numbers are that's not the case. And right now it's starting out with a 51% no vote, 42% yes vote. That measure's in real trouble starting out that way. And the reason why it's starting out in trouble is that already at this stage of the campaign where there's not really been a lot of money on it, it hasn't been on television every day, it's become a partisanized race. And Democrats are already strongly against it. Republicans are strongly in for it. I think they have a real challenge, the proponents of that measure, starting out this way, to get it over the finish line.
Politico today, though, had something that showed they have a massive fundraising advantage in this particular race. The yes side does. The no side has been pretty tepid up to this point with no real formal opposition, although some of the big donors have started coming out and opening their checkbooks to oppose it.
It's about $20 million in the bank for the yes campaign. And you got to figure there'll be some more where that came from. Independents, no party preference voters, also strongly opposed to the measure at the first ballot test here. It's failing by 20 points among independent voters.
It's not good.
That's not a good way to start the campaign. No. So,
and people have the problem with this being easy to understand is that people have pretty fixed opinions up to this point.
That's
so
right.
It's going to be harder to persuade people.
And our friends may be right that it's so simple. It's a common sense thing. You should have to show your ID to vote. The opponents of this have done a very effective job in making it a partisan issue.
And making it like, the arguments against it are pretty weak, but people respond to it. That it's a racist policy. Mm-hmm. It's akin to a poll tax.
Right. It's nothing like that at all. But it doesn't matter if it is or it isn't. Voters believe that it is.
Voters believe that it is.
And that's what you're seeing in those early numbers for that poll.
Yeah.
Well, with that, Matt, I think we're out of time. So to all of you, thank you for joining us this week, and be sure to join us next week when, if you want to know all that's going on in the last week of the legislative session, tune in because you're going to learn all about it and then some. I'm Tim Anaya. Thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you'll join us again next week for a look at politics and policy from a free market perspective here on Next Round. Thanks again.